The casual tennis fan often wonders why players apologize when they hit a lucky shot. For example, a let court. The vast majority of players will raise their hand and apologize. Well, I'm going to tell you the truth. The apology is a 100% dishonest apology. Players are not sorry that they hit a lucky shot. In fact, they're super happy to have won the point, but yet they don't go like this after hitting a let court. They raise their hand and say sorry. So why is that the case? Well, it's because of this thing called tennis etiquette. So let me explain to you what tennis etiquette is. These are the unwritten laws of tennis. And the most obvious example is the shaking of the hands after the match. Nothing is going to happen to you if you decide not to shake your opponent's hand. The USTA is not going to fine you. The ITF, the ATP, or the WTA will not fine you if you refuse to shake the opponent's hand once the match is done. Everybody does it in 99.99% of the matches. In fact, when somebody doesn't do it, it's a big story that gets a lot of headlines. And most players don't think about shaking hands with the opponent. It's just what you do as a tennis player. And there are many other things. For example, if your opponent rolls their ankle, you're going to go over to the other side and you're going to make sure that the opponent is okay. You also are going to rarely see any physical altercations on the tennis court. This is something that's just frowned upon, and it's very rare. I've been in the tennis game for 30 plus years and I've never seen a real physical altercation on the tennis court. So for me as a coach and a player, I abide by the unwritten laws of tennis because I respect the game of tennis. Of course, things like screaming and throwing your racket are sometimes hard to control, and it goes against the tennis etiquette. Some of these things are difficult to control in the heat of the battle, but I can tell you that I try my best to respect my opponent, to have a friendly atmosphere on the match, and I teach the same to my students, which means that when I hit a lucky shot, I'm super happy on the inside, but I'm still going to raise my hand and apologize to my opponent. Now, at the same time, I can tell you that as a tennis fan, which I'm a big one, I watch tennis every day, when somebody doesn't follow tennis etiquette, it is super entertaining to watch. My two favorite players from way back in the day were Jimmy Connors and John McEnroe, that broke the rules of tennis etiquette. Jimmy Connors, in one match that was played on a red clay, he crossed to the side of his opponent, which goes against tennis etiquette and actually might be against the rules, and he wiped the ball mark with his foot before the umpire got a chance to look at it. Everybody knows that John McEnroe had a horrible temper. I'll never forget a match in Stockholm where John McEnroe walked towards the bench and he slammed all the drinks off the chair. And I believe that it was either the Queen of Sweden or the Princess was sitting in the front row, and ice went flying everywhere, and I think she got hit by a piece of ice. So these two guys definitely didn't follow tennis etiquette, but they were unbelievably entertaining to watch. Now in the modern era, the two guys right now that often break the rules of tennis etiquette are Nick Kyrgios and Alexander Bublik. Bublik will do underhand serves. He will stand right behind the service line on a first serve of the opponent, and everybody knows that Nick Kyrgios does things that are even more outrageous. Is this something that I would teach to my students or employ as a player myself? No. But is it entertaining to watch? It 100% is. So while I think it's important to respect the sport of tennis, I'm not going to be a hypocrite and tell you that when you have a player that breaks these unwritten laws, it creates a lot of excitement, and the good versus the bad. For example, when Borg was playing against McEnroe, the contrast between these personalities was unbelievably entertaining to watch. But to me as a coach, there's a much deeper meaning behind tennis etiquette, and this is why I teach everyone to follow it very closely. And let me explain to you what I mean. So when I play tennis, I perform at my best when there's a friendly atmosphere on the court. I perform at my worst when there's tension, when I can see that the opponent hates my guts. It creates an uncomfortable feeling inside of me. I feel more anxious, more nervous, and I don't play my best tennis. Now, on the other hand, there are players who will thrive on this tension. John McEnroe did, Jimmy Connors did, but even today, there are players who will thrive on tension that's created on the match court. For example, Nick Kyrgios in the 2022 Wimbledon match against Tsitsipas, admitted in the press conference that he got exactly what he wanted out of the match, where he got so much under Tsitsipas' skin that Tsitsipas flipped out and started shooting balls into the stands and shot one ball into the scoreboard. He was very close to being disqualified, which is something that's very uncharacteristic for Tsitsipas, but it was Kyrgios that was able to get into his head. But in the vast majority of cases, players perform much better in a friendly atmosphere. Remember, if you have an easy overhead and you decide to hit your opponent with the overhead, the only thing you're going to do with that is motivate your opponent to beat you more. If you do an underhand serve, if you stand right behind the service line on a first serve, you're only going to motivate your opponent to beat you more. At the clay court Masters in Rome, when Cameron Norrie hit Djokovic with the easy overhead that he could have put anywhere in the court, Djokovic was so angry. You could see the fire in his eyes, and I jokingly made a story on my Instagram saying that Djokovic was going to win the French Open because of Norrie ripping him with the overhead. Very similar at the tournament in Queens. Musetti hit a super easy overhead right at Holger Rune, and Holger Rune admitted in the press conference afterwards that that shot motivated him to beat Musetti even more. So understand that if you do things that are going to anger your opponent, you're going to give your opponent motivation. And also, you got to respect the game of tennis. I do believe in these unwritten laws of tennis. Yes, you can go against these laws. You're not going to get penalized. You don't have to shake your opponent's hand. You could scream "come on" in your opponent's face if they're double faulting on making unforced errors. You could try to humiliate them by doing underhand serves or behind the back shots or staying right behind the service line when they're serving. You could try to hit a ball right at them when you could put the ball anywhere in the court. But remember, there's something beautiful about this game. It's called a gentleman's sport for a reason. And if everybody follows the tennis etiquette of having enough respect for your opponent when he or she beats you to shake their hand after the match, you can respect the other unwritten laws of tennis as well.